Hello everyone and welcome back. In this video, we are going to discuss how we can extend our action creators so that they will be able to perform type checking for us, where they receive an additional action through a .match method that we're going to attach onto them. And what this will do is it will check the action that it receives against the action that it's meant to create. And essentially, these action creators are now performing double duty. They generate actions out of them, specific actions, but they also type check actions against the action that they hold. In order to do this, we need to leverage something known as a type predicate. And a type predicate is kind of like a function that verifies whether a specific argument that it receives is going to be a narrower type or not. And I mean narrow as in more specific. So let's say, for example, we had two different types. Let's say we had one type, which was alien, and this had something where it was, fly, for example, which is of type string. Just as an example. Doesn't really matter what that is. Now, let's say there is also a type human, and what it has is speak, which is a function. Actually, let's make both of these functions so it's much more clear. Now, if we had some function that checks whether or not this is a human, what should happen is that based on this function, it will receive some entity or some argument, and this can be either a human or an alien. What should happen is that after this verifies that the entity is human, then the type that comes out of it should be something that is narrow to the scope of human. So that means that inside, what our logic needs to do is that our logic needs to assume that this entity is a human. And here what we'll do is we'll say, okay, the speak method here should not be equal to undefined. If this is true, then what we'll get back is that the entity should be, in theory, more narrowed once we've run it. So what happens here is that we need to add this additional type definition that the entity is human, like so. So that's what this function aims to prove. This function receives some argument value, which can only be either human or alien. The logic itself essentially casts the entity as human. The reason why we do this is if you try and call entity.speak like this, you'll get a type error. You'll get a type error because alien does not have the speak ability, because this is a union type. So you can't call, again, a method that doesn't exist on it. So we have to say, hey, assume entity is going to be human and check the .speak method. Because if you call .speak in JavaScript on something that doesn't have it, this is just going to be undefined. But if you call it on something that has it, then it won't be undefined. So in the JavaScript world, this works, but in TypeScript, it won't, because unless you cast it, TypeScript is going to say, hey, if I get an alien, I don't have the speak method. We know that, but we want to leverage that. We want to call it if it doesn't exist so that we can check if the method on it is equal to undefined. If it is, then we know it's not a human. Now, if speak is on it and it's not undefined, then we know for sure this must be human. So if it's human, then the output of this function is this type predicate. It's narrowed that the entity that I received must be human. That's what this logic is aiming to do. And essentially what it allows us to say is that, let's say I get some value. We for some reason have some value called Josh. And let's imagine that when we called it, we don't know what he is. We don't know if it's a human or we don't know if it's an alien. If we say, is human on Josh, like this, then inside, if I were to say Josh.speak, then this should work. Because essentially, as long as this passes, notice how even inside of a hover over Josh, automatically TypeScript knows, oh, this must be human because it passed this if condition statement, and this type predicate function narrowed this down so that it must be human. This little check right here, this is keyword that we wrote. This is narrowing this type so that anything that passes this function means that whatever you gave to it, if it's used later on, the type has been narrowed significantly smaller. So that is the whole idea around type predicate functions. And we need to leverage this in order for us to verify that an action we're receiving is a specific kind of action. Because that's what we're going to say. We're essentially going to modify our code so that we leverage these to match those actions that it receives. If it is of this action, then we know it's of this action. We can now leverage it inside of our reducer and respond accordingly. So this is the whole idea around using these matchers, these type predicate functions. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to do that in the next video.